All right, welcome to lesson 1 on percent proportions. Now, you've probably heard the word percent before, okay? Percent is something that you see all the time in math. For instance, and in your daily life. For instance, when you log onto PowerSchool and you look at your grades, all of these are percentages. You might be getting an 88% in math class, which translates to a B, okay? We've also talked about the word proportion, and just to review, a proportion just says that two ratios are equal to each other. So we've got two ratios here and an equal sign in between them. So with percent proportions, this is only used when you are using percentages to compare numbers. The first ratio is going to compare the part of a quantity to the whole of a quantity. The second ratio is the equivalent percentage, or percent, and we can show percent using two little circles with a slash through them, out of 100. So you may ask, what does our percent proportion look like? Well, there are 4 parts to any percent proportion. We're going to have a part, a whole, a percent, and 100. And the percent proportion will look in this formula, or in this format. The part will be over the whole, and that ratio will be equal to the percent over 100. So repeat after me. Part over whole equals percent over 100. This is very important to remember. Part over whole equals the percent over 100. And it's the easiest way to solve a percent problem. So in looking at our proportion, the part is the part of the whole. For example, if we have one slice of pizza, this is the part of the whole pizza. So one slice would be our part. Okay? The number that represents the part is usually either before or after the word is in math. The whole is the entire thing or the total. For example, the whole in the pizza would be the whole pizza. The number that represents the whole is always after the word of. Okay? The percent is always followed by a percent sign. And 100, percents are always out of 100, so the bottom of the second ratio should always be 100. So the bottom right in our percent proportion is always 100. So let's go ahead and continue to look at this. As I said, in our percent proportion, we have our part on top over our whole, and that's going to be equal to the percent over 100. Now, the word is like a trigger word or a clue word for the part. And the word of is like a trigger or a clue word for the whole. All right, let's go ahead and try one. So, our first example, number 1, is what number is 60% of 130? So right away in our proportion, the bottom right is always going to be 100. So you can always fill in 100 down there. Now we need to ask ourselves, We need to ask ourselves, what is going to go on top of the 100? Well, the percentage will. So in this problem, our percentage is 60%. So we'll put 60 on top of the 100. And then it says of 130. Well, if it's of 130, 130 then is going to be our whole. So we can put 130 on the bottom left. Now, you're going to notice that we're missing our part right here. So what we can do is we can actually solve this proportion by multiplying the diagonal numbers together. 130 times 60, which should equal 7,800. And then we can take that solution, 7,800, and divide it by the number that's not circled, which is 100. Divide it by 100, and we end up with an answer of 78. So our P, or our part, is going to equal 78. And that's our answer right there. All right, let's try the next one. What percent of 24 is 18? Okay, well, we know that the bottom right of our proportion is always 100. Now in this problem, it says of 24, so 24 then is going to go on the bottom left. Is 18, so 18 then is going to go on the top left because we've got that word is there. And we notice that we're missing our percent. So we can go ahead and solve our proportion by multiplying diagonally. 18 times 100 equals 1,800. And then 1,800 or 1,800, we can divide that by the number left over, so divide it by 24. And we end up with a percent of 75%. We can put the little percent sign after it, and we have our answer. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the rest of the blanks to fill in for the rest of the problems. And then you can go ahead and try to solve these problems and check your answer using the answer key on Google Classroom. So for number 3, we're looking for 60 is 90.5% of what number? For number 4, 45 is 38% of what number? Number 5, what number is 125% of 250? And then number 6, what percent of 200 is 250? So if you want to try these on your own, go ahead and try these on your own. If you prefer to try them with me right now, please continue watching the video. So we've got 60 is 90.5% of what number? Well, right away in our proportion, the bottom right is going to be 100. Above the 100 goes our percent. So in this problem, we see that 90.5%, okay, so 90.5 is going to go on top of the 100. And then we see that 60 is. So since the word is after 60, we can say, oh, that's going to be our part. So that's going to go on the top left as our part. And we then are looking for our whole. That's what's missing. Now we want to solve for the whole. So you're going to circle and multiply the diagonal numbers. 60 times 100 equals 6,000. And then you can take 6,000 and divide it by the number that's left over in our proportion. So we're going to divide it by 90.5. And that is going to equal 66 with a lot of decimals behind it. So if we look at our directions, it tells us to round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So we're going to go ahead and round 66.29 to W equals 66.3. And that would be our final answer. Okay, let's go ahead and try the next one. So it says 45 is 38% of what number? So what we're going to do is go ahead and fill in the